Hi everybody. Today I'm doing an inspection on the conversion hive that 2 weeks ago to the day we moved bees into this hive from a nucleus colony. The bees in that colony were on Langstroth frames, and because most of my hives are Layens frames, in fact all of my hives are Layens frames, I wanted to migrate those bees from the Langstroth frames to the Layens. And there's several ways to do that, but the way that I'm going about it is with this hive that I built. I did a video about this a little while back, so 2 weeks ago. And so I encourage you to go back and watch that video where we moved the bees in for more details about how this hive works, how I made it to hold both Langstroth and Layens frames together, and how we put them in there. But it's been 2 weeks since we did that, so now I am doing an inspection to verify, number one, make sure that we got the queen on the Layens side. I have a queen excluder in between the different frame sizes. The queen excluder, for those who aren't familiar with it, is basically just a screen that's big enough for the worker bees to go back and forth in between, or back and forth through the screen, but not big enough for the queen to get through. So it would keep the queen on one side. They're often used in Langstroth boxes, which stack vertically to keep the queen in the brood boxes below so that she doesn't get up and lay any eggs in the honey supers above. In our case, we're using them to try to keep the queen on the Layens side and not on the Langstroth side. So I'm going to try to confirm that the queen is on the Layens frames. If I can find the queen, that'll be awesome. But if not, at least I am looking for brood, for evidence that the queen is laying on the Layens frames. And after 2 weeks, that should have been plenty of time for the bees to build up comb on the Layens frames and for the queen to start laying eggs. And by now, 2 weeks later, they should have built that comb, queen laid eggs, and some of those eggs should have gone from the larva stage into the pupa stage, which we will see as capped brood. The worker bees don't emerge from their cells until 3 weeks, until 21 days. So that would be about a week out at least. So we're going to be looking for that evidence today, just kind of getting a checkup on how much comb the bees have built out. This was a pretty strong colony to start with. They had fully packed the frames in the nucleus colony, and so that is not an issue. Their population seems good. Just yesterday I saw orientation flights from this hive, and what orientation flights are is when the worker bees, after worker bees emerge from their cells, they go through a series of jobs. Their first duties are cleaning out cells, and they start feeding older larvae, and then they start feeding younger larvae. Then they work on building comb, and then they take over guard bee duty, guarding the entrance to the hive and any intruders. And their final job of their lifespan is as forager bees. They go out, find nectar and pollen. And so an orientation flight is when you see, and they usually do it as a group. It's usually a whole bunch of them come out of the hive. You can see them kind of looking at the hive entrance, flying around a little bit, getting familiar with the hive entrance, and then they start flying in circles. And they're orienting themselves to this location, this hive at this location, so that they can then go off, find honey and nectar, and find nectar and pollen, and find their way back. So it's kind of neat. You see all this activity around the hive of bees flying around. If I'm working in the yard, I'll usually stop what I'm doing just to go watch the orientation flights, because it's pretty cool, and I want to check and make sure it's not a situation where one hive is robbing another, but that's another story. But so I just saw orientation flights yesterday, which tells me, as far as the life cycle going on in here, the bees are developing, they're putting out more foragers, and that's a good thing. Now we are getting a little later in the year, so the queen, her egg laying may be slowing down some, but I do expect that we should see brood in here at this time. So we'll see what we find out. Hopefully it's good news. We'll find out together. So here we go. So first thing, looking in here, I see I have some bees milling around. I do have my cover boards, but there is a gap at the end just because I'm short a cover board. So we got some bees milling around in here. We'll uncover this back up to where the Layens frames are, which is here, and then the Langstroth frames are back here. We'll kind of see what's going on the inside. by moving these, this gives me space to work in here. Coming up on our section where the Layens frames are, the bees have these sealed down pretty well. They use propolis for, which is basically a glue and a sealant that they make to seal up the hive. You can see on there this line. This is propolis. They use tree sap to make that, and they will use it to seal up any cracks in the hive. They usually go along all the corners of the hive and seal it up. Make sure there's no drafts, and they kind of glue things together with it. So they have these cover boards glued down with that propolis. Okay, now we're up to our divider board. Excuse me for a second as I set these down. I'm trying to be careful not to squish any bees in between. They are persistent that they want to go underneath. Okay, so that brings us to the end of our Layens frames, and I'm going to leave these covered. The Langstroth frames have gaps at the top where the bees can come up in between, and so I want to leave my Langstroth section closed right now, so I don't expect we'll be disturbing stuff too much, but in case my queen crawls over from one side to the other, I don't want to lose track of her. So we'll just work in the Layens side for now. Okay, so as I expect, these frames farthest towards this end, farthest away from the original frames, don't have much put on them, but it is kind of interesting. They are starting to build out some wax on here. I can pull this out, and I don't know if you really see this on camera very well. Yeah, I guess you can maybe see, but they're kind of building out wax comb on top of this foundation. This is a wax foundation that I put on the frame, and they're building that out to give depth in order for the queen to lay eggs and to store resources, nectar and pollen. So that's good that they're getting a start on that. I didn't realize I didn't look for my queen, so I don't expect her to be this far down in the frames, but you never know. I found queens in odd places. This is interesting that this second frame is built out less than that first frame. So we kind of have a gap between our old frames, our old brood section, and the new and where they started building out on the new frames. But I do expect they've built out more on these other frames closer to the originals. And it looks like that is the case. Taking a look through here, looking for the queen. One of the best tips I found, I've heard several good pieces of advice about finding the queen. One of the best things I found is you don't have to try to look at every single bee. Instead, scan over the frame and look for what's different. The queen moves a little different than the others, moves around with a little more purpose, and there's usually a cluster of activity around her, and sometimes the bees even cover over her, kind of like they're trying to hide her. And so I'm looking for that something different, and that's usually the way I can spot the queen quickest. Once you look for that something different, then you look for her abdomen, which is larger. You can see on this frame, they've almost got across the whole thing. They've got it built out a little more. Now there's nothing stored in here. It's not built out quite enough for that. No eggs or anything, but they're still working. This next frame has a lot more bees on it. So we'll see what's happening here. Taking a quick glance just to see if I see the queen offhand looking in there. Making a quick mark on these ends. Generally try to put the hive, the frames back together just as I took them out, so I'm putting a mark on that end so I know which end, which way the frames are oriented. I should have done that on these. I'm pretty sure I got them back in the same way, but because they're not built out a whole lot, it's not going to matter as much. But as we get into where the bees may be building some brood, it's going to be more significant to get things back together the way that the bees set it up. Still not seeing my queen. I don't see any brood on this frame. I do see quite a bit of pollen. Maybe you can see that. Up in here, there's quite a bit of pollen stored up in there. That is great. They need that pollen to feed the young larvae. So they store that up. They will store the pollen together with nectar, and it will ferment together, and that is what we call bee bread. It's a nutritious food that they use to feed the larvae. Still am not seeing the queen, and a little disappointed that I'm not yet seeing any, although I don't have good light here right now. With this light comb, sometimes you need a little bit of sunlight over the shoulder to really see the eggs. The eggs look like a tiny seed of rice at the bottom of the comb, and a little white egg against a white background is a little hard to spot when you don't have good light. Where I'm located right now, some experienced beekeepers may notice that I'm kind of in the shade here. The sun is just feet from peeking out over this tree above me. So the location I have, it is partly shady here depending on where the sun is during the day. It does get a pretty good amount of sunshine here, but right now we're in the shade, which is kind of a nice thing for me, but often working bees in full sun is a little bit better. They tend to be a little bit better tempered in the sun for whatever reason. But that's alright, these bees don't seem to be in too bad a temper today. Alright, now this is our last Layens frame, so this may be our moment of truth here to know whether we have a queen, an active queen on this beam. Pardon the dog, don't know what she's hearing. Alright, so here we go. I'm going to glance on this side first. Oh yeah, this is beautiful. I'm going to show this in a second. Don't know where Her Majesty is, but she is in there. You can look at this frame. You can look through the bees here. You can see all these cells that are capped over on here. That is all capped brood, which is what I was looking for. That tells me that our queen is over on this side somewhere. She's been able to stay away, out of my eyes for now, but that's okay. I know she is there. So we did our job keeping our queen on this side, so this is a great thing. And then there's lots of bees over here. Wait a minute. No, thought I saw her for a second, but it was just a worker. There's several places on here where I'm seeing bees kind of piled on top of each other. And so it's very possible that our queen is in one of those piles. In fact, I'm suspicious she may be right. Well, they just moved and I don't see her. So, yeah, that's all right. So we've got capped brood there. That is great, and a pretty good coverage on that brood. So that's great too. At this point, that tells me what I need to know here. One of the critical things about moving the bees from the Langstroth frames to the Layens frames is getting our queen on this end. And so when we put the bees in this hive, we shook them out over on this end. I didn't see the queen at that time either, but hoping that we would get the queen on this end. And that capped brood tells me that we did. So she is in here and doing her job. I'm taking a quick look at this queen excluder to see if she might happen to be on there. Not great light, but I am not seeing her, so that's okay. Some queens are good at hide and seek. So that kind of settles the questions and the reasons for doing this inspection. I would like to see them storing up some more nectar. We see they have good pollen being stored up, and that is great. Didn't see a whole lot of nectar in here, which this season of the year, it's not too surprising. We're in mid-August, which is kind of our dearth season. And I also saw, for those who follow the Facebook page, Honey by Shrunk and Kids, I posted a picture or a little short video of bees going after a bucket I have of old comb. And that's something that bees will typically do in the dearth period. They can't find nectar from flowers, so they will go after whatever source they can find, scavenging it from old comb they can find, which is better than robbing it from another hive, which is also a possibility. But so it might be because of that they're not bringing in a lot of nectar. That doesn't concern me too much. They are building out comb pretty good, so they're getting enough nectar to build comb. They do have honey stores in the Langstroth frames, and so, you know, I think they're pretty good with that, not concerned about that. So we're going to let them keep working. In another week or so, we should start having more bees hatching out from this side. When we put the Langstroth frames in here, they also had good brood, so we've still got, you know, population growth in here. We don't have what's called a brood break, which is a period of time where there is no brood, which is what happens when you catch a new swarm and put it in a hive. It takes them 21 days and they don't get any new bees. In the meantime, the older bees are dying off. We don't have that situation here, but I'm just real happy. I'm rambling on a little bit because I'm really pleased to have found that frame with two sides with good capped brood. Tells me the queen is there, tells me the hive is doing well, and they're building out comb on the next frame. Hopefully they'll start, and there may be eggs in that frame. Like I said, it's hard in this light to see the eggs against the white comb, but you know, I'm real pleased, real happy, and so far I think our conversion hive experiment is going well. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.